Welcome, Abby X, to our new show at Dimples Hair. Thank you so much for joining us. How you doing today?
I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for asking me to be here, James.
This is our first time actually really meeting each other. It's the first time I've ever seen Abby face to face or camera screen to screen. And I love saying how I meet people, and especially in this show. And it's a wonderful thing, the connections, because we're about community here. I met Abby through an amazing person who will be on the show some point soon. What a wonderful guy, David Goldblum. I'm so grateful for you to be here. I just want to give a quick shout out to Abby here and what she's done, and we'll go into why she wanted to be on the show and what we're going to talk about. Abby's big time in the movie industry, everyone. Abby does movies like no one else, and she was doing a show on HBO Max called Raised by Wolves by Ridley Scott. Brilliant sci-fi stuff. She's done rom-com things. Sarah Eccles' book, It's Not You, The 21 Reasons You're Single, and a movie called Will Just Be Us. And you've done loads of things. There's millions of things. The King's Speech, all kinds of production. And what I really loved, I saw you've done a bunch of mentoring. You are mentoring storytellers, former mentor of Time's Up in the Room, and mentor for women in films. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have been doing storytelling in different forms since I was really young. I started interning when I was 15 in Chicago for the illustrious Jerry Springer show. Super prestige given my where my career would go later on, but it was super informative. I didn't really have any outlet for like how to learn storytelling that young. And when I came across a program out here in LA called the Young Storytellers that goes into LAUSD schools, public schools in the area, and teaches kids, 11-year-old, how to do storytelling. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had had that as a kid. It would have been such a great outlet to like formally learn how to tell a story with proper story structure, which is only something I learned much later down the line. And it's just a great outlet to teach kids how to use their voice, get out what's in their head out on the page, and how like cathartic and healing and fun it is. And then so that's my favorite mentoring to do, is a program that I've been involved in since about 2017. And I say to the mentors that I bring in, because I'm a head mentor, I'm like, I promise you it'll be your most favorite hour of the week. And inevitably, my mentors are like getting more out of it than the 11-year-olds, but it's such a cool program. And then we bring in real actors to act out these kids' 5-page screenplays. So it's that's my favorite volunteer opportunity that I do. But yeah, anytime there's an opportunity to share my experience with people. I've had a wild ride in this business. If the pain and torture and good times and bad can help someone else, then I'm all for sharing it.
So, in being in Hollywood, people from all around the world are going to see this, and everyone sees Hollywood like, whoa, the glitz, the glamour. And you have a great career. You've done really good, and you're doing really great. And I want to go on we talked about the outside.
Yeah.
What's on the outside? The cash and prizes. What about the inside? Because we are here to talk about the inside job and what goes on, and hair is just a part of it. You know, we're here to talk about healing, to talk about the journey of loss, and, Beyond the Head Start is our title of our show. So tell us a little bit about what you told me in our first call when we had our first ever talk.
Yeah. The reason why I was excited to come on and talk about it is because this is something I've not really talked about in terms specifically of hair loss or hair issues publicly before. I've talked about it. I'm a member of several 12-step groups, and I talk about it when I lead in those, but I've never talked about it hourly. And it's only since 2000 and around 17 as well, when my life radically changed. I call it my year. Is 2016 was my apologies for the cursing, but it's my spiritual shitstorm year, wherein, how I was living on the outside, really in the very bifurcated world of how I was feeling and living on the inside, sort of came to a head. And I really had to change my lifestyle so that I could integrate both and really start living a life where I was as true on the outside as I was on the inside. Because I was leading this, like you were saying, this high flying life of what looks like cash and prizes on the outside. I was a film studio executive. I'm flying all over the world. I'm, working on movies and film sets around the world and with like the most A-list people since the very beginning of my career. I've been working with, creme de la creme. But the way that I was dealing with the pressure of all of that and the coping mechanisms was just a lot of addiction and compulsion, which is how I dealt with life pretty much since I was born, very young. Specifically talking about the hair stuff, I developed at the time they were labeling it under OCD, but now they call it a BFRB, body focused repetitive behavior, and that's called trichotillomania. It's a hair pulling disorder. For me, it lives in the same lane as the other addictions and compulsions I picked up later on, which was an eating disorder, dysfunctional relationships, and pretty much anything. I'm an equal opportunity addict. Like I will anything that like I can use to cope that's outside of me and not inside is that's my wiring is to go to that. And so by the age of 24, my eating disorder had gotten to a place where I didn't know what to do anymore about it. And really not about the eating disorder itself, but really like I didn't know how to manipulate and control my body into a place I thought would be successful or acceptable enough for me to be successful in my industry. Like I'd exhausted all of the things prior to 24 anorexia, bulimia, compulsive exercise, laxative diet pills, anything you could do with to try and manipulate my body, all of the diets in the world, like had stopped working and I didn't know what to do. And I'll just be really honest. I didn't know this at the time. It's called suicidal ideation. But the thoughts in my brain were like, well, if I can't get my body to look how I need it to look to be successful, to get X, Y, and Z, I just may as well not be here. And that kind of black and white thinking is just the way that I thought. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I thought everybody thought that way. Like, you wanna do the things you need to do, anything you need to do to be successful in life. I was so achievement oriented. I always joke that my parents, I was raised Jewish. We weren't praying to, like, the God of our ancestors. We were praying to the gods of achievement. Um, so, that was the way I thought. And so I was at such a bottom with my body that I was willing to go to my first 12-step program. And through that, I've learned that I cope with life. I don't have a lot of abilities. I didn't naturally or wasn't taught to go inside to self regulate when I have big emotions or to process life. Like I'm always naturally going to look outside of myself. So it's been appealing of the youngin to remove all of the addictions and compulsive behaviors to deal with life. Being in the industry that I was in the role that was in, specifically as a studio executive, where the industry was going, as we see now, everybody understands how dysfunctional the studio system is. We're in a double strike at this moment in time. And I believe it's due to this dysfunction. And I couldn't be abstinent and sober from all of my things while still in the studio system. But I didn't make that decision myself in 2016. The universe decided for me, and we were all fired from the studio I was at. And there was a regime change. We were all fired, and I was given an incredible severance. But if I took another job, the severance ended. So the natural path for me felt intuitively like it was time to be independent and work for myself. And it was through that process I got time and resources to do just some deeper healing and just see like if I had to use things compulsively and addictively to be in that dysfunctional system. Now I work for myself and I don't need to use those things. And I'm much more attuned to when I'm in environments because one of my addictions and compulsions will start back up again, because I'm wired that way. And trichotillomania, it was the last compulsion that I was working on. I have found a lot of relief from that one specifically through another 12-step program for hair pulling. And so I just feel really motivated to give back to people who may still be struggling with that.
Hold on a minute. There's a 12-step program for hair pulling?
Yeah.
What? Oh my god. There truly is a 12-step program for everything.
Yeah.
That is I didn't know that. Wow.
So it works for everything.
First of all, I just wanna commend you for going straight to the 1%. You just we talked about, like, my imagination at the beginning, like Rolls Royces and red carpets and things like that, and you just went straight in and you talked about things that you've dealt with, and you got in there. I really, really appreciate that. You are very brave, Abby X. Very, very
Well,
brave. And this is your first time talking about this stuff you said on a show like this. This is amazing. And I mean, I God, I was flowing. So many things were coming. I kept looking down and writing notes. So many things were coming to me. Things you said, spiritual shitstorm year. I guess we are allowed to swear on this. It's okay. That was 2016 to 2017, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
What was the catalyst for the SS year?
Well, how old was I? I was 35 in 2016, but the year before I had started things like the floor beneath me started, you know, shaking. I was finally, and I've heard this is common, like I was finally in a really secure, safe place. I was finally actually working for incredibly kind people who looked at me as a human being and really were invested in my growth. And while we were still in the studio system, it really felt like a healthy family system, which is the first time. I mean, I've worked for famously the most toxic people in Hollywood, and not just Harvey Weinstein, who I have worked for, but many, many others. And that's not even my worst boss. So that sort of gives you an idea. And so to finally work for people who were really functional and safe, and I had enough resources around me, I was very well resourced, is when, like, I think, I don't want this to be like a trauma log, but is when I think like some stuff that I was ready, to deal with just sort of pushed through the surface. I had an episode while visiting my parents. Remember, I said, like, I pray to the gods of achievement. Not only was a senior film executive at a prestige film studio, but I had also on the side, as a side hustle, created and was producing a reality television show on E that I had gotten like from my brain onto the air from 2013, 2015. So 2015 is when was like the catalyst year. And so like there's no world where that's not like high achieving. And I'd gone to visit my parents at their best friend's house in Palm Springs, and I tried to show, my parents what I was working on, and like my mother just like insulted it and dismissed it. And
Oh no.
and for whatever reason that time
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
created this like chasm where all of this emotion just like erupted. And prior to that, I was a person who didn't, while I was working on like how to regulate my feelings through 12 step, I still wasn't a person who ever cried, who ever experienced. I always
Mm.
thought like, oh, other people experience fear. I don't experience fear. And sorry for you. But it turns out I was still pretty a little bit numb. I was using enough stuff, not, excessively, just to keep sort of the edge off and keep like myself a little numb. And now is a time like the universe was like, okay, you're ready. And then like up came this like iceberg of like frozen feelings that was underneath the surface. And it was that, I mean, I was with my sister, thank God, who's like, we're super close. And I went out to the car with her and I was hysterically crying, something she's never seen before in her life. And she was like, I think you need to go back to therapy. And it was by going to therapy at that age that I was able to finally see through the narrative that had been through my whole childhood, which is that I was the fucked up one. There's something wrong with me. I was defective because of the trichotillomania and the other stuff, food, body stuff. And it wasn't actually me. I was what's called an identified patient. That's a therapy term. I was the person in the family experiencing the symptoms of this sick system. And there was my parents did the best they could with the resources they got, as they say, that lovely old chestnut. But there was a lot of dysfunction. And I was coping with it using these um addictions and compulsions. And so there was a lot of frozen feelings underneath. And through 2015 to 2016, I was really able to start seeing what the real story was of my childhood. But I was still using things a little bit here and there. But like the feelings started poking through. So through that year, I started getting panic attacks, like really debilitating panic attacks. I was in another dysfunctional situationship that I didn't want to be in, and I could recognize it, but I was powerless over that. And then we all got so by 2016, all of that stuff like came to a head. I got a DUI, and that was no fun. and got fired and had debilitating panic attacks. Like, I was the person who was like, always had my shit together, tough as nails, could be in any, shitstorm and not lose it. And now I was losing it. And I was like, well, thank God I have this time and resources to really figure out what's going on. And I used that time. And I'm really grateful that I had that time because now, yeah, I'm on the other side of that. Some people call it their dark night of the soul moment. And that truly was. But like, if you're willing to go down deep to the underworld and go through that journey, coming out the other side, I just feel like a completely different human being. I'm grateful for it now, that spiritual shit's.
So I've heard of this term called whack-a-mole. And it's like you've mentioned a bunch of things. You said addiction, compulsion, eating disorder, relationships, BFRB, the trichotillomania, like
Yeah.
from one to the next to the next. It's like, you know, I heard like I solved one of them,
Yeah.
boom, and then another one pops
Yep.
up. No, boom, I got it. And then another one pops up, popping up, achievements, got it, boom, buying, obsessive buying, boom, obsessive something
Yep.
else. So the obsessions like pop up, and I can't put my hands down on all of them at once. I can't control that to stop them all. So does it ever stop? Is there ever a graduation?
I love that question. Is there ever graduation? As I'm told in the rooms of recovery, we never graduate. But I'm also I love many modalities. And I've always wanted to know, like, what's wrong with me so I can fix myself. And finding out through this process, in therapy, and then, trauma is the like buzzword of the times right now. I think that covered New York Magazine. It was like a couple weeks ago, it was trauma and talking about all this stuff. And I started learning about that. Like, we didn't have these words when I was growing up. We didn't have personality disorder or anxiety or, all of these things that I was learning about having grown up with. And so what I also learned is the science of this stuff, which is, if you grow up in an environment where your nervous system, and I'm going to totally butcher this. So any of the like neuroscientists or proper therapists are out there listening, I apologize. But, the way I understand it is if you grow up and your nervous system doesn't develop properly because of the environment you're in, it doesn't react properly to stress or stimulus. Your fight or flight system is faulty. The way I describe it, when I'm sharing is like, some people have automatic cars. I've got a manual car. So like I got to manually bring myself down from being activated into fight or flight, which is all of these new tools I've been given graciously in the rooms of recovery and therapy and all the other modalities that I do. So like 90% of the time go to those, the meditation, the yoga, the writing, the connecting with other people instead of going to a compulsion. But, 10% of the time I still go to that stuff, which is why, like, to answer your question, I never graduate because I'm still gonna sometimes, go to that faulty wiring. And so I just keep coming back, as they say.